Today, we are going to present a prophecy of the last verses of the 11th chapter of Daniel, the book of Daniel in the Bible. Many people have found interpretations of these verses, and most of them say that they are a spiritual interpretation, that they are not literal, although it is well known that the verses that have come before them, from the verse 1 to 39, have a literal interpretation in history, and that has been demonstrated. We will see how this continues to have a literal interpretation, and to prove that with the past history, and to see that how we are living its fulfillment in today's days of the end of the time, referring to Israel in the time of the end. We are going to read the verses that involve this prophecy and then go one by one to them, so that we can find out if truly this is the correct interpretation of this prophecy, and see if we are truly living in these days, in the end of the time. So let's begin with Daniel 11, in chapter 11, verse 40. And it says, "And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him." And this is where the chapter 11 of Daniel ends, it finishes. But Daniel did not separate his book in chapters. His writing had a continuation, and it continues in Daniel 12, verse 1. And it says, "And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book." It is explaining that after these verses, after the last verses of Daniel 11, it becomes closer to the coming of Christ, the second coming of Christ. So these verses must be of great importance to be able to understand, to see if we are in these times. Ellen White wrote about this book, and precisely this chapter. She said, "The world is stirred with the spirit of power. The prophecy of the 11th chapter of Daniel has nearly reached its complete fulfillment. Soon the scenes of trouble spoken of in the prophecies will take place." She says that these verses, from beginning to end of that chapter, had to be fulfilled. So let's begin to unfold these verses from 40 to 45 to see what they really mean. First, verse 40 says, "And at the time of the end," which is the times that we are living in, we know this since we had the time of the end begun in 1798, "shall the king of the south push at him." Push at who? "And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind." We see that the king of the south pushes at the king of the north. And the king of the north goes against the king of the south like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. So who is the king of the north, and who is the king of the south? Well, we know that the prophecies were given from Israel, from Jerusalem, in that area of the Middle East. In this case of Daniel. Now, that is the center of the prophecy, so we must indicate that north and south are north above Jerusalem and south below Jerusalem. Being that the prophecies of Daniel 11 is a succession of empires from verse 1 to 39, with that separation of the king of the north and king of the south. But which is the king of the north, or who is the king of the north in the end of time? Well, Uriah Smith wrote in the book Daniel and Revelation, referring to verse 14, henceforth the name of Rome stands upon the historic page, destined for long ages to control the affairs of the world. Rome was destined for a long period of time, till the coming of Christ, to control the affairs of the world. Finally, have that new world order that was to be expected, where everyone, every nation and every country was going to go and will obey the beast and will worship it, and exert a mighty influence among the nations, even to the end of the time. He said that even to the end of the time, this power, Rome, from the empire Rome to the pagan Rome to the papal Rome, its continuation to the days today, will go until the end of time. Ellen White said that this power at the end of the time of Rome would not work alone. It would work in a threefold union. She said, through the two great errors, the immortality of the soul and Sunday sacredness, Satan will bring the people under his deceptions. While the former lays the foundation of spiritualism, the latter creates a bond of sympathy with Rome. The Protestants of the United States will be foremost in stretching their hands across the gulf to grasp the hand of spiritualism. Spiritualism, in this case, would be not only the religions that believe in the immortality of the soul, but also secret societies, which is one of the parts of this threefold union. They will reach over the abyss to clasp hands with the Roman power, and under the influence of this threefold union, secret societies, which is spiritualism, the Roman power, and the United States, this country will follow in the steps of Rome in trampling on the rights of conscience. And this is something that we are about to see very, very soon. It is gradually evolving into that final moment where the rights, referring to our liberty of conscience, are going to be abolished completely. So the king of the north, in this interpretation, in the true interpretation, as we will see, is basically this threefold union. But who is at the head? We know that it is the Vatican. It is the papal Rome. It's the Pope. And this is basically the Vatican, secret societies, and the USA. This threefold union is the king of the north. Is it true? We will continue to see if this is really the true definition. History has to prove this. It is not because we try to prove it with our words, but the past has to prove if this is true. So when was the king of the north attacked by the king of the south? Do we all remember this event? 9/11. This was a moment that's changed completely our world, and really was the moment that began the Third World War. The level of control and authority, especially in the Western world, was impressive. How really it's augmented. It's changed completely our lives, this moment. And verse 40 said, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. The word push really means, in its Hebrew definition, to butt with the horns, or figuratively, to war against. Now this moment happened, and we can't deny that it was the moment when the United States, this king of the north, was most strongly hit. We're going to look at this card game called Illuminati New World Order. This is a card game that was created by Steve Jackson. Bush's father, when he was in the CIA, tried to eliminate this game from history, basically. But it persists still today, and we can see in it evidence of how truly the secret societies and Freemasonry are involved in these events that change our lives and change society completely. And this game was created in 1995. Now we know that the Illuminati were founded by Adam Weishaupt. And Adam Weishaupt was a Jesuit. So when we talk about Illuminati, Really, we are talking about the Jesuits, so we are talking about the Vatican, basically. And as you can see here in the copyright, obviously, 1995, it was created in the year 1995. Now, when was the Twin Towers? Twin Towers was in 2001. And how is it that they have these cards here? One of them as the terrorist nuke, and one of them as the Pentagon. These two events occurred in 2001. 6 years before that, these cards were made, and they were presented to the public. It is still a card game that can be purchased. So they knew this before? Well, of course they knew this before, because this was orchestrated. It was organized so as to create this false attack against the USA to afterwards go forward with their own attack against this King of the South, to conquer basically that territory and its resources. Did the King of the North go against the King of the South after this attack? Well, here we have the 9/11 Commission report. This is of the government of the United States, and it says, in this restricted National Security Council meeting, the President said it was a time for self-defense after this event. The United States would punish not just the perpetrators of the attacks, but also those who harbored them. Secretary Powell said the United States had to make it clear to Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the Arab states that the time to act was now. He said we would need to build a coalition. The President noted that the attacks provided a great opportunity to engage Russia and China. Very interesting to see how Russia and China are already involved in this conflict in the year 2001-2002, when all this began. Secretary Rumsfeld urged the President and the principals to think broadly about who might have harbored the attackers, including Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Sudan, and Iran. So did the king attack the King of the South? The King of the North attacked him? Yes, he did. And the King of the North shall come against him. And definitely, he entered into those countries, and he overflowed and passed over, and we all saw it. And this was 20 years ago. This is recent history. These verses are close to the second coming of Christ. This is recent history because we are living in those days. Verse 41, it says, he shall enter, the King of the North, into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, as has happened. Which is the glorious land? Glorious land is Middle East. We know that the glorious land is Jerusalem and all that involves it, the promised land that was promised to Abraham. And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. So Edom, Moab, and Ammon, if they were not attacked by this King of the North, who are they in today's present days? Well, the Encyclopedia Britannica and the World History Encyclopedia tell us this. Ancient Jordan, the ancient biblical kingdoms of Moab, Gilead, and Edom lie within its borders, as does the famed redstone city of Petra. The capital and largest city in the country is Amman, named for the Ammonites, who made their city their capital in the 13th century before the Christian era. The Jordanian kingdoms of Edom in the south, Moab in the center, and Ammon in the north all grew in power during this time. These kingdoms were inside what is today's territory of Jordan. So the King of the North did not attack these territories. These escaped the hand of the King of the North. Jordan did not escape, was not attacked by the King of the North. And that was so. Truly, the King of the North did not enter into Jordan. Now, why is that? The US Department of State tells us that the United States deeply values its long history of cooperation and friendship with Jordan. The United States and Jordan share the mutual goals to end the violent extremism, the peace process, and Jordan's opposition to terrorism parallel and assist wider US interests. Based on our shared strategic goals and a close working relationship, Jordan was designated a US major non-NATO ally by the United States in 1996. And that was so. That was why Jordan was not attacked, because it is a US ally, an ally of the King of the North, although being a Muslim country. And we could see that they have good relations with the Vatican. The King Abdullah II bin al-Hussein, here with Benedict XVI, and also with Pope Francis. And when the popes went to Jerusalem to visit the Wailing Wall and to visit Jerusalem, the city, they went through Jordan. They flew to Jordan, stopped there first, and then went to Israel. That is why they have, as we have read, a good relation, but not only with the US, but the whole Kingdom of the North. Remember, secret societies and the Vatican. That is why in verse 31 it said, "But these shall escape out of his hand." Jordan escaped. Jordan was not involved in these attacks. Daniel 11 verse 42 says, "He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries in the glorious land, and the land of Egypt shall not escape." Verse 43 says, "But he shall have the power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps." It is saying that it would go after Egypt, and also after Libya and Ethiopia. So we will have to see if this is true. Did the United States, the Vatican, and the secret societies go after these countries? Well, history will have to prove itself. This is just to remember that this prophecy is being preached for more than 20 years before 9/11. This has been saying and warning in Adventist Church, and it has been rejected completely to the point that they have been calling it complete nonsense. And in the year 2006, there is a recorded conference, because there wasn't any recorded before this year, with precisely this screenshot, this image of these images, and saying Afghanistan and Iraq were attacked. But who would go after Iran, Syria, and who else? Well, this was said in 2006. And what's happened in 2010 to 2012? The Arab Spring. 6 years before, we were warning that this was going to happen. And what countries were affected? Well, we see Tunisia, Algeria, Sudan, Oman, Yemen, Jordan, Egypt, Syria, Morocco, Iraq, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Libya. All of them were affected in this Arab Spring. And you could say, no, but these were revolts created in the Muslim countries. But who orchestrated these revolts? What interests were in these revolutions that occurred? Because we must remember that in these countries, most of them have great natural resources. And we could say, were they provoked? Well, the Illuminati card game had this card also, power to the people. And we could see how one of these arms has tattooed a triangle with the one seeing eye of the Illuminati. So yes, they were involved in these revolutions, in these revolts, and these changes of regimes. So Egypt, the prophecy mentioned Egypt. And curiously, natural resources, petroleum and natural gas. What happened in Egypt? Well, Henry Kissinger, that we know has been one of the most powerful people influencing the United States government and all the more political and economical movement also involved in the World Economic Forum. Well, he said this, referring to the overthrow of Hosni Mubarak. Kissinger said, "This is the first act of a drama that needs to be played out." This is a drama. A drama is a play that also has a script. It is something that is written. It is something that is prepared. So they knew, because they were creating this drama, that it needs to be played out. And it was just one step in this play that they were organizing. And verse 42 said, "And the land of Egypt shall not escape from the king of the north." It also said, "But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt." What happened in the revolts? Well, not only the resources of petroleum and natural gas, changed, the other people started to gain the dominance over those resources in the United States and the NATO, obviously, but also Egyptian artifacts were stolen from museums, and literally gold and silver were robbed when there were those revolts. When there was that chaos in Egypt, many people, well, took the occasion to steal from museums artifacts of great value. So not only the black gold, the oil, crude oil, was stolen, but also literally artifacts. And we can see how the prophecy, the biblical prophecy written 2,600 years ago, in this case, we can see its literality today. Libya, the prophecy also mentioned Libya. So let's see what's happened in Libya. Well, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries says apart from petroleum, Libya's other natural resources are natural gas and gypsum. Its economy depends primarily on the oil sector. So we can see the King of the North had great interest in dominating this sector. And also the OPEC, this organization, is in the Illuminati card game. What a coincidence! How is it possible that these people are organizing all these kind of revolts to be able to dominate these markets? Well, it is true. Literally, they dominate the markets. And they explain it to us here. We can see it here in these cards many years before this occurred. Gaddafi was the politician, the dictator that was at that time in Libya. And there was a moment in 2011 where he accused the United States, France, and the United Kingdom of trying to control crude oil. He was not interested in doing negotiations with them. And why was that? Because he was interested in negotiating with Russia, China, and India. He wanted them to invest in Libyan oil. And he was not interested in commercing with the King of the North. So what would the King of the North do? Well, the King of the North obviously was interested in those resources. And in 20 October 2011 was the fall of Gaddafi. With the violent protests, we all saw it, most of us saw it on television. And we can see in Wikipedia explains, in Libya, Gaddafi's government allegedly resorted to the use of air force to suppress protesters. And in response, NATO led an air coalition to stop it. Libyan rebels, aided by NATO, expelled Gaddafi from Tripoli, the capital, and took control of the government. On 20 October 2011, Gaddafi was found on the run and was executed, ending the first phase of the war. So the King of the North was involved in the execution of Gaddafi and in these revolts and the fall of their dictator. And we can see even the card of the dictatorship in the INWO card game, the Illuminati New World Order. So yes, they were involved in this too. And we can see how the King of the North went against Egypt, went against Libya, and many other countries. But we are going to focus on the ones mentioned in the prophecy. But basically, against all the southern Arabian Muslim countries below Jerusalem were affected by this attack of the King of the North. The prophecy also mentioned Ethiopia. And I say here Yemen. And why is that? Well, we have to see, because we can think Ethiopia, that's in Africa. That is in, it's not where we would see today's Yemen. But history tells us something different. That the kingdom of Saba was in the actual Yemen. And Saba, also given as Sheba, was a kingdom in southern Arabia, region of modern-day Yemen. The kingdom is probably best known today from the biblical narrative in the book of Kings, chapter 10, verses 1 to 13, and 2 Chronicles 9, 1 to 12, of the visit of the Queen of Sheba to King Solomon. Most of us know of this story. It particularly features in the tradition of Orthodox Tewahedo in today's Yemen, and is also asserted as the home of the Queen of Sheba in the medieval Ethiopian cultural work called the Kebra Nagast. Sheba was located in Ethiopia. Modern historians agree that the heartland of the Sabaean civilization was located in the region around Marib and Sirwa, and it was in what is now Yemen. So the Ethiopia, the biblical Ethiopia, that is written in the Bible 2,600 years ago, is today's Yemen. Was Yemen affected by this attack of the King of the North? Was it affected by the Arab Spring? What is in Yemen? Curiously again, Yemen has reserves of oil, gas, and other minerals. But most of the country's mineral production is focused on the production of oil, gas, and limestone. So we can see that, yes, again, they went for that gold and silver. They went, the King of the North, for these resources. The Yemeni Revolution or Yemeni Intifada followed the initial stages of the Tunisian Revolution and occurred simultaneously with the 2011 Egyptian Revolution and other Arab Spring protests in the Middle East and North Africa. Effectively, in those same years, they lived their own revolution and their own attack from the King of the North. Remember, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. Literally, these verses, one by one after the other, have had their fulfillment. Now, verse 44 tells us, after these attacks, "But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him." Shall trouble who? Well, the king of the north. "Therefore, he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many." So the king of the north, after attacking the king of the south, senses this fear from the east and of the north. We must remember that the center of the prophecy is Israel, is the glorious land, the Holy Land. So what is to the east and to the north of Israel, of Palestine, that could create this fear to the king of the north? Well, to the east we have China, and to the north we have Russia. Does Russia and China really ring a bell? Today, what is happening? What has been happening for the last decade or so? How these two powers have risen so rapidly that truly they are making the king of the north be afraid. "But tidings out to the east and out of the north shall trouble him." Again, we have Russia and China in the Illuminati New World Order cards. US Department of Defense. What does the US government tell us about China and Russia? Avril Haines, the Director of National Intelligence, discussed the intelligence community's assessment of China and Russia, America's strategic competitors, during testimony before Congress this morning. This was March the 8th, 2022. She said China is coming ever closer to being a peer competitor to the United States economically, militarily, and technologically. She noted that China is also engaged in its largest ever nuclear force expansion and arsenal diversification effort in its history. The Chinese want to match or exceed US capabilities in space. The nation also presents the broadest, most active and persistent cyber espionage threats to US government and private sector networks, she said. Russia also remains a focus of the intelligence community, deservedly so in light of Vladimir Putin's recent and tragic invasion of Ukraine, which has produced a shock to the geopolitical order with implications for the future that we are only beginning to understand, but are sure to be consequential, she said. And truly, the consequences of what is happening with Russia and Ukraine, with China and Taiwan, well, the world, if you have a bit of common sense, you can realize that this is not going in a good direction. This is going in the direction of the Third World War and the confrontation between these two powers, which is NATO and BRICS, which is basically King of the North and King of the South. Because who are allies of the Muslim nations? They are allies with Russia and China. This is also part of the King of the South. We know that the King of the South is literally the Muslim countries, but they are allied with the news of the East and the news of the North. Pope Francis says we are living through Third World War. And this is only one article, but Pope Francis really has been for a decade saying that we are living in the Third World War, but in pieces. Pope Francis, in this brief article, he says, ongoing war in Ukraine, noting that today we are living through a Third World War, one that is being fought piecemeal. And this is so. It is the Third World War we are living in, and it is gradually evolving and escalating into a major conflict. He sees the opportunity to pray for the Ukrainian people, imploring Our Lady to support them in their daily choice of goodness, justice and solidarity with those in need, generating hope, joy and inner freedom in your hearts. well, it is quite a hypocrisy to see how they are generating, because remember that behind the Illuminati are the Jesuits, and the Pope Francis, the actual Pope, is a Jesuit priest. They are creating these wars and these conflicts, and at the same time they are calling for peace. Well, we can see that there will be no peace. They are not interested in peace. They are interested in a conflict because they have an objective. A newspaper in Spain, El País, in the international part says, the threat to American hegemony is real. China and Russia see historic opportunity. There is a historic opportunity for China and Russia. The two powers which have imposed autocratic rule on most of Eurasia are likely to view the present moment as ripe to challenge the US order. Until now, there has been an order dominated by the King of the North, the United States, the Vatican, and the secret societies. But there is a menace to this order. There is a threat, and it is these two powers that are dominating the east side of the world. We must remember that popes did mention this New World Order, and it can seem strange to hear it from a religious leader, but it is not only a religious leader. We must remember that it is also a political leader. The Vatican is the only state in the world which has both entities, being a religious but also a governmental state. The Pope calls for a new world order. The need for a new international order based on the experience and results obtained during these years by the United Nations continues to be felt. This is Pope John Paul II. Pope Benedict XVI says, in the title of this newspaper, this article, it said, Pope urges forming New World Economic Order to work for the common good. And the actual Pope, instead, by building a New World Order based on solidarity, by exploring innovative ways to eradicate arrogance, poverty, and corruption, all together, each in our own way, without delegating or disempowering ourselves, we can cure injustice. We can see that this New World Order is being implemented with the excuse of the common good. The common good that they are implementing in the minds of the people to what is the good for humanity. But what is the really true good for humanity? Well, it would be to announce that Jesus is about to come for the second time in very few years. And we can see also that the card of the Vatican City is also in this Illuminati New World Order card game, along with the card of the World War III, which is where we are now. Of course, it will have its final fulfillment with the Armageddon that most of us have heard about, even if we haven't heard or read the Bible. It is a term that is mostly known, commonly known, but we are truly living in the World War III and they know it. The thing is, do we know it? Are we conscious? Are we aware that we are in World War III? So we have read verses 40 to 44, but 45 is a very interesting verse. And if we continue to take it literally, it says, And he, the King of the North, shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. The King of the North, the Vatican at the head of it, has to plant the tabernacles of his palace. And that's not just a camping tent. That's headquarters. That's its base. Between the seas, in the glorious holy mountain. Now, there are some people that say that the glorious holy mountain and the Holy Land is the United States. When it is always has been, it is and will be Jerusalem. Because between the seas, it refers us also precisely there, between the Mediterranean Sea and between the Dead Sea. Just between those both seas, there is the Temple Mount, the glorious holy mountain. So the King of the North has to establish its headquarters there. It has to establish its tabernacles, its palace. Now, how will that be? Because they have been wanting this for a long time. The Roman Catholic Church has been wanting to change its headquarters to Jerusalem for many centuries. In fact, the or as we know by the ex-Jesuit priest Alberto Rivera, he explained how the Catholic Roman Church created the Muslim religion, Islam. They founded basically Muhammad. They helped him write the Quran, and they used the army of the Islamic army to be able to conquer Palestine and to get the domain over that territory. He explains this openly. And then that went out of hand. At the moment they had the power, the domain over that land, they said, now we don't need you. So they lost complete power over the Muslim army. So that was the reason why they used the Crusades. The Crusades were not, it was not another reason to basically recover that territory. And President George Bush has also mentioned how these attacks in the Middle East were really as if they were the Crusades, because their objective is to recover the power over that land, over the glorious land, the promised land that they think it is promised for them. We can see Pope John Paul II in the Wailing Wall, and we can see Benedict XVI also as well, and Pope Francis as well, because they are waiting something there. They want that land. They want something to happen there. They want to wait for someone there. There is a book called Outline Studies in Daniel by Edwin R. Thiel. And he wrote this in 1951. He was an Adventist archaeologist and missionary, and he wrote this book. And regarding the passage in Daniel 11:45 that says, "And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas," Thiel pointed out the following. If the power here under discussion is the papacy, the question may well be asked whether there is a probability that it will ever leave Rome. In reply, it may be said that the present unrest in Europe could easily result in a situation in which it would be necessary for the papacy to move its seat somewhere other than Rome. Indeed, the course of events seems to indicate that it is only a matter of time before the Pope will be forced to leave that country. It should be noted that the Inter-American Division of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the year 1965 supported this interpretation. Now they don't. Well, obviously because the Jesuit infiltration has come to such a point that they are not going to accept this. But it is interesting to see that the Pope will be forced to leave that country. Now, we must remember that the Kingdom of the North is secret societies, the Vatican and United States. What did the United States, the Kingdom of the North, do to enter the territories of the Kingdom of the South? Well, 9/11 occurred. But if they knew it 5 years before, and we can see it also even in The Simpsons, how they showed it, that it was going to happen, and many cartoons in television, the Illuminati, the Jesuits, were preparing that event. So if they prepared 9/11 as an excuse to become a victim and attack the King of the South, then wouldn't the Vatican do the same? So that means that the Vatican, something would have to happen in the headquarters of the papacy. This beast, the beast of Revelation 13, will have to be attacked, the first beast, so that they can move to Jerusalem and plant the tabernacles of their palace there. Is that so? This other quote from the Review of the Herald by Uriah Smith, also referring this verse. He said that the Pope Pio IX's favourite plan of removing the seat of the papacy to Jerusalem is not the above item significant, taken in connection with Daniel 11:45. He wrote that this verse could have a connection, a relation with the movement of this King of the North, of the Vatican, to the Holy Land, to the glorious land, between the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea. What are we living today? Because all of this that we have read is past history. But today we are living a war precisely in that area. This is an image of Gaza, the 7th of April. So we have a conflict, the King of the North, with the East and the North, with Taiwan. We have Ukraine, but we also have Gaza. So what has to happen in Israel so that the King of the North can put and plant its tabernacles of his palace there? How did this begin? Well, it began with the 7th of October Hamas attack in Israel, with some soldiers that flew there on some paragliders. And we all know that there were 1,200 people that were killed. And from that massacre till today, we are living in this war, and it is really involving our whole society. It has affected us quite completely, hasn't it? This newspaper in Iran said, how did Israel intercept 99% of Iran's drones and missiles? We know that recently Iran attacked Israel after the attack that was on the embassy in Iran, and most of the drones and missiles that were launched were intercepted. So a few paragliders enter Israel and they kill 1,200 people, and no one knew about it, apparently. And they didn't react until 7 hours afterwards. The government of Israel did not react. There was 7 hours period between the attack and between the Israeli government's response to the Hamas attack. Well, here it says, in its attack on Israel, Iran launched more than 300 killer drones, cruise missiles and ballistic missiles on Israeli territory. The IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari confirmed this weekend. This attack was completely defended and it was useless. Why was that? Because of Israel's Iron Dome. They have a defense system, which is basically some radars that receive that the missiles are coming. They send their own missiles which collide with the ones of the enemy, and they destroy completely that attack. They have a representation here on the newspaper. So some paragliders enter Israel and they penetrate the defenses of the Israeli military completely with no problem. But Iran sends 300 drones and missiles and they are all intercepted. How is that? Well, the New York Times tells us that Israel knew Hamas's attacks plan more than a year ago. Israeli officials obtained Hamas's battle plan for the October 7th terrorist attack more than a year before it happened. Documents, emails and interviews show, but Israeli military and intelligence officials dismissed the plan as aspirational, considering it too difficult for Hamas to carry out. The approximately 40-page document, which the Israeli authorities codenamed Jericho Wall, outlined point by point exactly the kind of devastating invasion that's led to the deaths of about 1,200 people. Hamas followed the blueprint with shocking precision. The document called for a barrage of rockets at the outset of the attack, drones to knock out the security cameras, and automated machine guns along the border, and gunmen to pour into Israel en masse in paragliders, on motorcycles and on foot, all of which happened on October the 7th. The plan also included details about the location and size of Israeli military forces, communication hubs and other sensitive information, raising questions about how Hamas gathered its intelligence and whether there were leaks inside the Israeli security establishment. The document circulated widely among Israeli military and intelligence leaders. It is unclear whether Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu or other top political leaders saw the document as well. So, the military forces of Israel received a document that displayed basically precisely how the Hamas attack was going to be the 7th of October, but the Prime Minister did not have any idea about it. How is that possible? So the military knew about it, but the government didn't. We see that the acting of the King of the North, the Jesuits, is basically to create a situation where they are the victims, to be able to create a situation where they can be the attackers, and it can be justified as it is being today. Although there's quite a conflict between interests and people, where some defend Palestine and some defend Israel, but truly they have gained this apparent justification that they can do what they are doing because they have been attacked. As was on the 9/11 event, as will be when the Vatican will be destroyed. It is basically their their way of working. And knowing in the card of the Three World Wars of Albert Pike, of the Illuminati, which is basically the Jesuits, how there was going to be a great conflict between the Muslim world and the Zionist world, which is basically all the NATO that is supporting all the Jewish movement. And as we can see again in the Illuminati New World Order card game, the Jihad, the Mossad and the Israel government is also involved with secret societies. And the Jesuits are behind all this. The King of the North is behind it. As we can see, this is only one article. We would need a complete conference to show all the amount of money that has been sent to Israel since the beginning in October. Here we can see how Biden advances $1 billion in arms for Israel and amid Rafah tensions. So why is the King of the North interested in planting its tents in Jerusalem? And how is he going to do it? Why is the Vatican interested in moving its headquarters to Jerusalem? And how will he do it? Holy War, Red Cows, Gaza and the End of the World. Let's take a look at this article, which is quite extensive, and we've selected only some paragraphs that interest us the most. It says, "It is said that this is where the world began, and perhaps where it will end. The true epicenter of the war in the Holy Land is not the devastated Gaza Strip, under Israeli assault since Hamas's bloody raid last October sparked the region's deadliest conflict in decades. It is a few dozen miles away in Jerusalem, at the holiest and most fiercely contested hilltop on earth. They are saying that the epicenter of this conflict is not in the Gaza Strip, it is in Jerusalem. And how is that? The war has increased religious tensions and given new impetus to a group of Jews and their evangelical Christian allies, who are set on rebuilding an ancient temple where millennium-old Islamic shrines now stand. A suggestion that arouses the horror not only of Palestinians and Muslims worldwide, but of many Jews in Israel and around the globe, as well as that of would-be Middle East peacemakers. Third Temple advocates have been preparing for the day when the temple can be rebuilt. For those that do not know what the Third Temple is, the First and Second Temple of the Jews were in Jerusalem, and at this moment where those temples were built, there is a mosque called the Dome of the Rock. And next to it, there is a very special mosque called the Mosque of Al-Aqsa. At the moment, those are in place where the Jewish temples were, but the Jews, along with many evangelical Christians, are wanting to build the third temple of the Jewish religion, thinking that would be the calling of Jesus Christ. The second coming would be at the third temple in Jerusalem. That is why there is a lot of money and movement from the evangelical community towards this Jewish community so that the third temple can be rebuilt. But there is a mosque in place just where they want to build this. It can be rebuilt complete with rabbinically certified red cows shipped from Texas for use in sacrificial purification rituals. The architectural designs are all ready, along the lines of the detailed biblical descriptions. Messianic Jewish supporters believe the rebuilding of the temple, rather than being divisive, would fulfill biblical prophecy to bring an era of peace, with the temple as a house of prayer for all nations. Christian backers, meanwhile, believe it would be an important step towards the second coming of Jesus and an apocalyptic last battle with the Antichrist. Our holy warriors who are fighting in Gaza are actually fighting for the building of the temple, one Jewish prayer leader pronounced recently on a controversial visit to the believed site of two previous Jewish temples in Jerusalem. They know that the reason of this war is the temple. That is their objective. And many Christian believers also think that it is the coming of the Messiah, but they are waiting a house of prayer for all nations. That means all nations, all religions, one Messiah. Standing before the Dome of the Rock, the gleaming Islamic shrine that has sat for more than 1,300 years on the same contested spot, Marina Sokol, an Israeli mother whose son was killed fighting Hamas in Gaza, proclaimed, "The war we are waging is a war for the Temple Mount. It is not a war for Gaza, it is a war for that esplanade of the mosques. In their war to destroy Israel and replace it with an Islamic state, Hamas leaders also readily draw on the symbolism of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, known to Muslims as Haram al-Sharaf, the noble sanctuary. It is the third holiest site in Islam with its Al-Aqsa Mosque, as well as being the holiest site in Judaism. This round of conflict is being waged by the resistance under the name Al-Aqsa Flood. The attack of the 7th of October was named Al-Aqsa Flood. They knew exactly why they were attacking. We know that this was provoked, as we see in the newspaper, the news that there was information 1 year before the attack that Hamas was going to do it. And the Israeli military forces stopped completely their defenses so that could occur, so that those paragliders could enter and initiate this conflict. They say it is not for the sake of Gaza or the West Bank, but rather for the sake of Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa. Hamas spokesperson Bassem Naim told Newsweek. They express openly that they knew that the conflict is for the sake of that Temple Mount. Israel's government has set its three war aims in Gaza as destroying Hamas, bringing home the hostages that remain, and ensuring that the territory can no longer pose a threat. Aims that have widespread support among Israeli Jews. But the hope that the conflict might be a step to the rebuilding of the temple also resonates for Third Temple advocates, who form part of the fringe that has gained strength under the right-wing government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And as they say, the government of Israel is supporting this movement. They are fighting for the Third Temple. The Muslims correctly understand the historical and religious significance of the Temple Mount for the Jewish people and therefore focus their incitement on the Temple Mount. Yitzhak Reuven, director of the Temple Institute's International Department, told Newsweek. In effect, the war in Gaza is very much a war over the Temple Mount. For Palestinians, the growing Jewish religious activity at the site is already a step towards cataclysm. These are the seeds of conflict and the seeds of the type of fire that could burn the entire Middle East. Palestinian academic Adnan Julani told Newsweek, "This is the most dangerous plot of land to play with." And here we are seeing the fulfillment of what was written so many years ago in that card, in that letter between Albert Pike and Giuseppe Mazzini, saying that there was going to be a confrontation between the Zionist political movement and the Muslim movement, and they were going to be destroyed one another in this conflict. While we make every effort in our limited ability to kindle interest in building the temple, the rebuilding of the temple is not a Temple Institute project. It is not only a project of this association. Such a monumental effort would need to be based on broad support from the people of Israel and members of the international community, he added. And as we have seen, the Kingdom of the North is interested in this movement. They are financing this war and they want to put the tabernacles of their palace there. The United States, secret societies, but above all, the Vatican. This is basically the area of the Temple Mount where there is actually the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, along with the Western Wailing Wall where we saw the three popes that went there. In this moment, in the center of this Temple Mount, they have this. The Muslims have the Dome of the Rock, one of the most sacred places that they have in worship. Now, do we think that they are going to demolish or place this building to another situation? They are not going to allow that, are they? They're going to defend this with their lives. And that is the last conflict as we are waiting. We see here a webpage of the Third Temple organization where they situate all the plans of where they are going to build this Third Temple. They say it openly. They are going to build the Third Temple there. So what is going to happen to these mosques? Where the actual Dome of the Rock is, they want to build this. They want to build the Third Temple. And they want to receive there the Messiah, because they say that the biblical prophecies explain that the Messiah will appear in the Third Temple in Jerusalem. We know that Jesus, when he comes for the second time, he will not stand on this earth. The Bible explains how he comes with the clouds, but the angels take up us upwards to where he is. Jesus does not stand on the earth when he comes. So who are they waiting for? Who are they waiting to stand there in this third temple? And who is going to receive this Messiah? This other newspaper, CBS News, we are only going to see a video that explains basically the article. What these red cows from Texas have to do with war and peace in the Middle East? What do a couple of red cows have to do with the Third World War? Well, we will see briefly in this video how they explain it to us.
The conflict in Gaza now entering its 6th month. The Israeli operation to root out Hamas terrorists there has resulted in the deaths of 30,000 Palestinians and 242 Israeli soldiers. The war started after Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, killing almost 1,200 people and taking nearly 230 hostage, some still in captivity. Despite the deadly outcome across the region, one trigger for the Hamas rampage has been widely overlooked. Chris Livesey has the story from Jerusalem.
The infamous October 7 massacre that sparked a war. But one confounding yet eye-opening motive has escaped the headlines. In a recent speech, a Hamas spokesman blamed the Jews for bringing red cows to the Holy Land. The cows he's talking about at a secure, undisclosed location are these, red heifers, to be precise. Some Jews and Christians believe they're the key to rebuilding the historic Jewish temple in Jerusalem and to beckoning the Messiah. To understand, you have to go back nearly 2,000 years when the ancient Romans destroyed the last temple in the city. To rebuild it, these believers point to the Bible's book of Numbers. It commands the Israelites to sacrifice a red heifer without defect or blemish, and that has never been under a yoke. Only then can the temple rise again. Caring for them on an Israeli settlement in the West Bank is Yitzhak Mamo.
So we have here, after a long research, we find in Texas.
In Texas?
Texas, United States of America.
Texas Red Angus, flying them 7,000 miles to Israel.
This is not a publicity stunt.
What do you mean?
Meaning, this is something you take very seriously.
Harry Potter is a good story. The Bible is not story. The Bible is a way of God to lead us.
A massive altar already awaits, where the heifers are to be burned.
According to some believers, the ceremony needs to be performed right here on the Mount of Olives, looking directly into where the temple once stood. But something else now stands in its place.
The Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, among the holiest sites in Islam. Today, only Muslims are allowed inside, but that's not stopping Jewish activists outside.
Once you got, you started here.
6 days a week, Melissa Jane Kronfeld leads groups from around the world who defiantly pray, as close as armed guards permit.
It's not about the destruction of Islamic holy sites. It's about preserving this place and being guardians over the house of God for all people.
So you're happy with it where it is?
No, it's going to go 100%, but I believe
it's going to go.
It's 100%, yeah. The whole thing is going to go. We have to build a temple.
When you say that Dome of the Rock has to go, MJ, it's hard for me to imagine something more incendiary.
Well, let me ask you something. The Middle East seems pretty destabilized right now, and the war, if I'm not mistaken, is already here.
To be clear, hers is a dream not shared by the Israeli government or by the vast majority of Israelis and Jews, but it's been enough to incite numerous Islamist groups. Hamas has dubbed its October 7 assault on Israel the Al-Aqsa Wave and has the Dome of the Rock on its emblem. But this is sacred ground to billions of Muslims globally, not just Hamas terrorists, stresses Imam Mustafa Abu Sway of Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Al-Aqsa Mosque belongs to all Muslims. So you'll find reaction from Indonesia to Toronto to New York. That's really given. Al-Aqsa Mosque belongs to all Muslims, and the Muslims today are 2 billion people. 2 billion people.
Simply by performing these acts, are these Jewish activists kicking a hornet's nest?
They are. They are.
A hornet's nest they're kicking all the way to Capitol Hill.
So good to see you here in the nation's capital.
Those sacred cows were showcased in Washington at a recent prayer gathering. Many evangelicals believe these red heifers will usher Christ's second coming.
And we need the Messiah to come, right? So for me, the red heifer, it's red for the blood of Jesus Christ.
Back in the West Bank, Mamo says the ceremony could take place any day.
But can you understand why Hamas could be outraged by something like this?
I cannot understand that even if they are right, why they have to slaughter and rape people to win their war.
Terrorists have been attacking us before we ever dreamed of these cows, he reflects. They don't need them as an excuse to kill. For CBS Saturday Morning, Chris Livesay, Jerusalem.
As we have seen, they have no doubt about it. Those mosques are going to disappear, and they will build their third temple there. And we have seen also how the United States and the evangelical community are behind this also. They are financing it. They are sending money so that this can be done. Now, if the red cow symbolizes Christ, as it is, it's surprising how the Jews can't even accept that. How is it that they are supporting animal sacrifices when we know that when Jesus was crucified, the veil was torn in half and the animal sacrifices were abolished? They were not needed anymore. But they are asking for animal sacrifices once more to receive a Messiah. So the intentions of this, we can see that are not biblical or Christian at all. So what Messiah are they waiting for? Also, we have seen the Imam of the mosque that has said there are 2 billion Muslims in this world, and we will see reactions all over it. This is a confrontation that we cannot really imagine the events that will occur in this world in the years from now. Now, the King of the North is supporting this, where we can see Joe Biden in Jerusalem along with his wife in the Wailing Wall. We can see Donald Trump as well. Obama also. George Bush's father as well in the Wailing Wall. Bill Clinton as well in the Wailing Wall. And his wife Hillary Clinton. They are all there, and they are all also awaiting for this Messiah, because we know that these people are involved in secret societies. We know that these people are really Satanists. And after verse 45, as I mentioned at the beginning, begins Daniel 12. But Daniel did not write a separation between these chapters. They are a continuation. It says that after the King of the North plants his tabernacles of his palace in the glorious holy mountain, then what happens? Michael comes. But these events have to happen before this. The Vatican has to transfer its headquarters to Jerusalem. And it mentions that there will be a time of trouble such as never was. I wonder if this rings a bell to another part of the Bible. But we must not forget that the other religions are awaiting a Messiah. The Jews await for their Messiah. Also the Christians are waiting for Jesus. The Muslims expect their Mahdi. The Hindus await their avatar, and the Buddhists expect their Maitreya. So who are they really waiting for without knowing it? In that third temple, where it will be a house of prayer for all nations. Well, the info cards say it to us again. So if the Illuminati info cards explain to us that there will be a Messiah, what Messiah is this? We know that this is not Jesus, precisely. It will be an imitation. It will be a falsification of this true Messiah that will be it will be accepted by the whole world and all religions, because something as spectacular as that apparition that they are waiting for will be accepted by basically everyone, especially in a moment of great conflict in the Third World War, where we will be surrounded by disasters, by famine, by all type of problems. When that Savior will come, everyone will accept it. In this book called Against Heresies of Irenaeus of Lyon, this is the 2nd century AD, he wrote, "But when this Antichrist shall have devastated all things in this world, he will reign for 3 years and 6 months, and sit in the temple at Jerusalem. And then the Lord will come from heaven in the clouds in the glory of the Father. This period of 3 years and a half remembers us of the 1,260 years of the papal persecution that was lived in this world, that finished when the time of the end begun. Will there be another 3.5 year period before the coming of Christ of persecution? Well, we know that after the Sunday law, there will be 3.5 years of persecution. This prophecy will have its double fulfillment. But take a look how he mentions, and he already knew, that this Antichrist, this papal power we know, will be emplaced in Jerusalem and will sit there, and there will be 3.5 years of persecution. And this can be explained with the Bible. Matthew 24 refers us to this persecution, as also in Daniel 12 is mentioned. And it says in verse 3, Jesus, as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? And Jesus in verse 13 says, When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whose readeth, let him understand. The abomination of desolation has various interpretations and prophetical meaning, but we know that one of them is the papacy, and the other is definitely Satan himself. Daniel spoke of this, and Jesus himself mentions in Matthew 24 and also in Mark 13 that the abomination of desolation will present itself in Jerusalem. We've seen it in Daniel 11 also. Those are the signs of the close, imminent coming of Jesus Christ. In Luke 21 also, this also remembering that in those times Jesus was warning that the armies of Rome were going to come and were going to dominate in that area, and Jerusalem was going to be destroyed. And that had double fulfillment. We will see Rome once again in Jerusalem. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 tells us, Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Do not be deceived, Paul was saying, that Christ is not soon to come at those times. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Falling away, in other versions, saying the apostasy, the papacy would have to appear as the power at the end of the times before the coming of Jesus Christ. Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, shewing himself that he is God. The temple of God. Once again, we are seeing Rome, the papacy, the abomination of desolation in Jerusalem, in the third temple. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things? And it continues. And now ye know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. We know that the gospel will be given to all nations, and then Jesus will return. But before that, it is mentioning a coming of that wicked, of that mystery of iniquity, which is the papacy, but it's also ultimately Satan himself. coming as if he were Christ. The word coming in Greek means parousia, the same word used for Christ's coming, seen on verse 8, because of the quasi-technical force of the term parousia and the frequent use of the term to describe the second advent of Christ, and the juxtaposition of parousia here with the same word in verse 8, many hold that the apostle is referring to Satan's spurious imitation of our Lord's own glorious coming, for the fact that Satan will have a parousia, seen in the Great Controversy, page 593. And Ellen White writes about this. She said, and it is known not only by her but also in the Bible, that Satan will have his own coming. So who are all these evangelicals waiting for? Who are the Jews waiting for? Who are the Muslims, the Buddhists, the people that are in the New Age? Who are they all waiting for? This Savior of this planet. Who is the Pope waiting for? He is waiting to receive Satan in the third temple in Jerusalem. As the crowning act in the great drama of deception, Satan himself will personate Christ. The Church has long professed to look to the Saviour's advent as the consummation of her hopes. Now the great deceiver will make it appear that Christ has come. In different parts of the earth, Satan will manifest himself among men as majestic being of dazzling brightness, resembling the description of the Son of God given by John in the Revelation. The glory that surrounds him is unsurpassing by anything that mortal eyes have yet beheld. The shout of triumph rings out upon the air. Christ has come! Christ has come! The people prostrate themselves in adoration before him, while he lifts up his hands and pronounces a blessing upon them, as Christ blessed his disciples when he was upon the earth. His voice is soft and subdued, yet full of melody. In gentle, compassionate tones, he presents some of the same gracious heavenly truths which the Saviour uttered. He heals the diseases of the people, and then in his assumed character of Christ, he claims to have changed the Sabbath to Sunday and commands all to hallow the day which he has blessed. And then is when he enforces the mark of the beast that previously has already been empowered by the first and the second beast, the United States. And once again, she says to us, the world is a theatre. The actors, its inhabitants, are preparing to act their part in the last great drama. We remember the drama that Henry Kissinger was talking about, the great drama that had to be played. Well, they know the drama. They know the biblical prophecies, and they are waiting for their Messiah. Lucifer is their Messiah, their Savior. With the great masses of mankind, there is no unity except as men confederate to accomplish their selfish purposes. God is looking on. His purposes in regard to his rebellious subjects will be fulfilled. The world has not been given into the hands of men, though God is permitting the elements of confusion and disorder to bear sway for a season. A power from beneath is working to bring about the last great scenes in the drama. Satan coming as Christ and working with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in those who are binding themselves together in secret societies. Have we not seen through these cards of the Illuminati, the Jesuits, that they are involved in this false coming of Jesus Christ, this Messiah they are waiting for, these plans of the King of the North and the King of the South? Those who are yielding to the passion for confederation are working out the plans of the enemy. The cause will be followed by the effect. There is a passion that is being moved for this third temple, a great passion that is being moved in the evangelical community, and they are working out the plans of the enemy without even knowing it. They are waiting for this coming of Satan himself. Now, there were 5 red heifers. 3 have been discarded because they are not considered pure enough, since a white hair has appeared. There are 2 left, and they have until August when they have 3 years of age, these cows, and they will not be able to be sacrificed anymore. So from now to August, we will have to be waiting and awaiting, expecting to see one of these red heifers being sacrificed, to use the blood of this cow to purify the Jewish people to be able to build this temple. So we must remember, those mosques are going to disappear, but also there's something is going to happen in the Vatican, something that is going to mean the removal of the papacy from Rome and take it to Jerusalem. And a great conflict, because as we've seen from the Imam in the news saying that there are 2 billion Muslims that are going to react after this. This conflict is served. It is right around the corner. We are living in this prophecy, and we are living the last days of this world, the end of the world, the end of this age, and the end of sin is soon going to finish finally. So, are we going to participate in this, or are we going to denounce this movement? To really see that this literal interpretation is true. We've proved it with history. We have proved it with actual news. We have proved that this is truly literal. It is not spiritual. The Holy Land is not the United States, as some may say. And it is not a difficult prophecy to understand. It is simple, and anyone with a simple mind and common sense will be able to see that this has happened as the Bible said 2,600 years ago. So the coming of Christ is imminent. It is very near to come. This is our channel in YouTube, our Spanish channel, Victor San Vicens, and our translated conferences in The Great Deception. I would recommend to take a look here to see how imminent is the coming of Jesus Christ. And there is much more information that proves that this prophecy is true, with other prophecies that go aligned with this one. I sincerely hope you do, and it is of your interest. God bless you.